She told me I didn't belong at my own table. My daughter, the same one I raised from nothing. Her voice didn't tremble, but mine almost did. I watched her sip from the crystal glasses I bought. Eat from the plates I once scrubbed clean with my own hands. Her husband sat beside her, quiet, proud, pretending not to hear. The silence between us was thicker than the soup on the table. And in that silence, something inside me broke. So I decided, right then and there, to remind them both who paid for this meal. Not out of anger, but out of memory. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Old Folks channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. The clinking of cutlery was the only sound in the room. No one spoke. The air was heavy, like it carried something unsaid for too long. My daughter, Emma, sat across from me, her eyes fixed on her plate, her shoulders stiff. The candlelight flickered, painting her face in shades of golden shadow. I tried to break the silence with a soft question about her day, but she didn't look up. My wife glanced at me nervously, as if she already knew what was coming. The roast on my plate had gone cold, and so had the warmth in my chest. Then, Emma finally raised her head, and what she said turned the whole room still. The words that cut deep. "You don't belong here." Her voice wasn't loud, but it hit like thunder. My hand froze halfway to my mouth, the fork trembling slightly. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My wife gasped softly, that kind of sound that comes when your heart breaks a little. Emma's face didn't move, but her eyes, those same eyes I'd once carried in my arms as a baby, were sharp, cold, almost unrecognizable. "Everything you see here," she said, "the house, the table, the meals, they're Mom's. Not yours." Her words echoed in the quiet like slow drops of rain. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her, trying to understand when love had turned into something like this. The fork and the receipts. I placed the fork down carefully, almost afraid the sound might shatter the air between us. My hands were steady now, too steady. "You think I don't belong here?" I said softly. "All right then, let's talk about who paid for all of this." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of confusion behind the anger. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small leather folder, old, worn, and heavy with truth. My wife's breath caught. Emma's gaze followed my hand, her confidence wavering for the first time that night. I slid the folder across the table, the paper inside whispering secrets it had held for years. "You see, sweetheart," I said quietly, "sometimes the past just needs receipts." And in that moment, I saw the first crack in her certainty, and I knew the night was just beginning. The old leather folder creaked as I opened it, releasing a faint scent of dust and time. Emma leaned forward slightly, her defiance cracking into curiosity. Inside were yellowed papers, mortgage payments, school fees, and medical bills, every one signed with my name. My wife stared at them too, her lips parting as she realized what I was showing. "Every meal you ate, every wall around you," I said softly, "came from hands that worked for you." The clock on the wall ticked louder, as if counting every truth that had been ignored. Emma looked pale now, her jaw tight, but she still didn't speak. The silence that followed was sharper than her words had been. Echoes of the past. I looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, I saw her as she was at 6 years old, sitting on my lap, drawing pictures of our family. "You used to call me your hero," I whispered. "When did that change?" Emma shifted in her chair, the mask on her face beginning to tremble. My wife tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled it back, not out of anger, but pain. The receipts fluttered slightly in the breeze from the open window, like ghosts of old sacrifices. "You think belonging is about blood or money," I said, "but belonging is what you built for others, even when they forget." Her eyes darted to her mother, searching for defense, but none came. A daughter's denial. Emma pushed back her chair suddenly, the wooden leg scraping the floor like a scream. "You're making this dramatic," she snapped. "You just want credit for everything." I stood up slowly, my voice calm but cold. "No, Emma. I just want you to remember." She looked away, but not before I saw the flicker of guilt. The air felt electric, heavy with what hadn't been said yet. Because there's something you don't know, I added, my tone lowering. Something I never told you. Her face froze, and the color drained from it completely. The rain had started outside, soft at first, then steady, a rhythm that filled the pause between us. Before you were born, I began, your mother and I, we weren't supposed to have a child. Emma's eyes widened a little, suspicion and fear blending in her expression. We tried everything, I continued, and when the doctor said it was impossible, I worked 2 jobs to pay for every treatment, every chance. My voice cracked at the memory. When you finally came, I thought God himself had handed me a miracle. The words hung in the air, raw and trembling. Emma's lips parted, but no sound came. The forgotten years. I could still see the night she was born, the hospital lights, the crying, the first touch of her tiny hand in mine. You were so small, I said softly. And I promised I'd never let anything hurt you, not even the truth. My wife turned her face away, eyes wet with tears. Your mother doesn't talk about those years because they were hard. Harder than you'll ever know. Emma's fingers curled tightly on the edge of the table. What truth? She whispered. Her voice shook, not with anger this time, but fear. What are you saying, Dad? The hidden paper. I reached back into the folder and pulled out one last envelope, smaller, sealed, and untouched for years. This, I said, is what I paid for most of all. I placed it in front of her, and she stared at it like it might burn. You think I don't belong here, I said. But without me, none of this would exist. She hesitated, then slowly reached for the envelope. The candlelight flickered as she tore it open, and her hands began to tremble as she read the first line. Her lips moved, whispering something she didn't want to believe. The paper shook in her hands. I could see her eyes scanning the words over and over, as if hoping they'd change. It was the hospital record, her birth certificate. Only one parent's name was written clearly. Mine. Your mother, I said quietly, wasn't there that day. She'd left before you were born. Emma looked at her mother in disbelief. My wife's tears spilled over, silent and shining in the light. He took care of you alone, she whispered weakly. Until I came back, when you were 5. The storm outside grew louder, echoing the chaos inside. The collapse. Emma dropped the paper, her breathing shallow, like she couldn't find enough air in the room. That's not true, she said, shaking her head. You're lying. But her voice was fragile, a child's voice again. I didn't speak. I just watched the truth take shape behind her eyes. My wife covered her face, whispering apologies that sounded years too late. The tension in the room shifted from anger to grief, slow, suffocating grief. I was the stranger who became your father, I said softly. And I would do it all again. The shattering. Emma ran her fingers through her hair, whispering, why didn't you tell me? Because love doesn't always need a headline, I said. Sometimes it just needs to be quiet. She stared at the table, the folder, the papers, the proof of everything she thought she knew. Then, with a trembling voice, she asked, who am I really? I looked at her, and for the first time that night, I didn't have an answer. The clock ticked. The storm raged. And the truth sat between us like a ghost that had finally spoken. Emma stood abruptly, chair falling backward. I can't stay here, she said, tears streaking her face. I don't even know who I am anymore. She stumbled toward the hallway, her footsteps echoing down the house she'd once called home. My wife tried to follow, but I stopped her. Let her go, I murmured. The rain beat against the windows harder now, wild and relentless. I could hear the front door open and slam, swallowed by thunder. My heart broke again, quietly this time. The waiting. Minutes felt like hours. The candles burned lower, the shadows growing longer. My wife sat on the couch, sobbing softly. I just stared at the front door, hoping I'd see her silhouette again. She'll come back, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. The receipts, the envelope, the truth, they all lay scattered across the table like pieces of a broken past. The storm outside had become a mirror of the one inside me. The return. A faint sound at the door, then a knock. I rose slowly, afraid to hope. When I opened it, Emma stood there, drenched, shaking, her eyes red. She didn't say a word. She just stepped forward and threw her arms around me, sobbing into my chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." I held her tight, my tears finally falling. "Now you do," I said softly. "And that's all that matters." The next morning, the world was quiet again. The rain had stopped, and sunlight touched the curtains like forgiveness. Emma sat at the table, still pale, but calmer. She poured coffee for me, something she hadn't done in years. "I read everything," she said quietly. "Every paper, every word." I nodded, letting the silence speak for both of us. The house, once tense and cold, now felt alive again, fragile, but alive. The words unsaid. We didn't talk about the night before. Not fully. Some truths don't need retelling, they just sit between people, shaping what's next. My wife busied herself with breakfast, her eyes still swollen but softer now. "Family," I said quietly, "isn't about who belongs where. It's about who stays when it hurts." Emma looked at me and gave a faint smile, one that felt like the beginning of something new. The quiet understanding. As she stood to leave for work, Emma paused at the door. "Dad," she said. Just one word, but it carried everything I'd been waiting to hear. I smiled, that old ache finally easing from my chest. When the door closed behind her, I looked at the table, the folder still there, a relic of both pain and proof. The morning sun hit it gently, like the past was finally at peace. The sun was high when the knock came, firm, deliberate. I opened the door to find a man in a gray suit standing there, holding a small envelope. "Are you Mr. Harris?" he asked. His voice was polite, but distant. I nodded, and he handed me the envelope. "It's from your daughter," he said before walking away. My hands trembled slightly as I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten letter, Emma's handwriting, the kind she used when she was young. The first line read, "I went to see her." My heart sank. Her? The other woman? I sat down slowly, reading every line. Emma had gone to meet her birth mother, the woman who'd walked away decades ago. She wanted to know why, the letter said. Why she left. Why you never told me. My throat tightened. I could almost see her, standing in front of that stranger, hearing the echoes of choices she never made. Emma wrote that the woman was older now, fragile, her eyes filled with regret. She said, "You saved me," Emma wrote. That she wasn't strong enough to be a mother. The words blurred as my vision burned with tears. The realization. I folded the letter carefully and set it down. The house was too quiet again, the kind of silence that follows truth. My wife walked in, saw the letter, and stopped. "She found her?" she asked softly. I nodded. She did. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I stared out the window, where the storm had once raged, and whispered, "Maybe now she'll understand everything." But a part of me wondered, had I done the right thing by keeping that truth so long buried? The sun was high when the knock came, firm, deliberate. I opened the door to find a man in a gray suit standing there, holding a small envelope. "Are you Mr. Harris?" he asked. His voice was polite, but distant. I nodded, and he handed me the envelope. "It's from your daughter," he said before walking away. My hands trembled slightly as I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten letter, Emma's handwriting, the kind she used when she was young. The first line read, "I went to see her." My heart sank. Her? The other woman? I sat down slowly, reading every line. Emma had gone to meet her birth mother, the woman who'd walked away decades ago. She wanted to know why, the letter said. Why she left. Why you never told me. My throat tightened. I could almost see her, standing in front of that stranger, hearing the echoes of choices she never made. Emma wrote that the woman was older now, fragile, her eyes filled with regret. She said, "You saved me," Emma wrote. That she wasn't strong enough to be a mother. The words blurred as my vision burned with tears. The realization. I folded the letter carefully and set it down. The house was too quiet again, the kind of silence that follows truth. My wife walked in, saw the letter, and stopped. "She found her?" she asked softly. I nodded. She did. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I stared out the window, where the storm had once raged, and whispered, "Maybe now she'll understand everything." But a part of me wondered, had I done the right thing by keeping that truth so long buried? 2 days later, Emma called. "Dad, can you come to the old park? The one with the oak tree." Her voice was steady, but quiet. I went without asking questions. When I arrived, she was sitting on a bench beneath that tree, the same one we used to visit when she was little. The breeze moved gently through the leaves, the smell of wet earth still lingering from the storm. "She's not what I imagined," Emma said, not looking at me. "But she's human. Just like you said." The conversation. We sat there, the wind whispering between us. "I thought I'd hate her," Emma said softly. "But when I saw her eyes, I saw mine. And I didn't feel anger. I felt pity." I nodded, my chest tight with emotion. "Sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I told her. "It just means letting go of the knife." She smiled faintly. "You always have a way of saying things," she said. "Even when I don't want to hear them." I smiled back. "That's my job, sweetheart." The promise. Before we left, Emma took something from her pocket, the birth certificate. "I want you to keep it," she said. "It belongs to you." I hesitated, then took it. "What about your mother?" I asked. Emma's eyes softened. I told her the same thing you told me that night. Family isn't about belonging. It's about staying. She turned to look at the oak tree, sunlight falling through its branches like hope returning. Weeks passed quietly. Then one morning, I found another envelope on the dining table, Emma's handwriting again. This time, no messenger, no knock. Just her words waiting for me. I opened it and read slowly, my heart heavy and full all at once. "Dad," it began, "I don't know if I ever thanked you. For staying. For fighting for me when no one else did." My throat closed. "You belong here," she wrote. "Always have. Always will." The memories flood. I sat at that same table, surrounded by old receipts and bills that once proved my worth. Now, they felt like ashes, unnecessary, because the truth no longer needed proof. I thought of every late night, every hospital visit, every sacrifice I'd hidden behind silence. And now, in a few lines of ink, all of it had meaning again. My wife placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "She sees you now." I nodded, unable to speak. The quiet smile. As I folded the letter, I noticed something else inside, a small photograph. It was of Emma, holding her own child. On the back, she'd written, "So she knows who raised me." Tears filled my eyes as I smiled for the first time in a long while. The past no longer haunted that table, it blessed it. And for once, silence felt like peace, not pain. Months later, the family gathered again at the same dinner table. This time, there was laughter instead of silence. Emma sat beside her mother, both of them, for the first time, looking at each other not as rivals in love, but as two parts of the same story. My granddaughter sat on my lap, her small hand gripping my thumb as she giggled at a story I barely remembered telling. The house felt alive again, whole. The toast. When the meal was done, Emma lifted her glass. "To family," she said, her eyes finding mine. "To the man who showed me where I truly belong." Everyone raised their glasses, the clink of glass echoing like a quiet prayer. I didn't say anything, I just smiled. Some moments don't need words. They live in the air, soft and eternal. The last look. After everyone left, I sat alone for a while, listening to the hum of the night. The table was empty again, but not cold. It was warm, bathed in the fading light of memory. I thought of that first dinner, the words that cut so deep. And I thought of how they'd let us all here. "You don't belong here," she had said. But now, as I looked around, I realized this had always been my place. That night, the food went cold, but the truth stayed warm. She never called me outsider again. Sometimes it takes a broken heart to rebuild respect. I didn't want her to feel small. I just wanted her to remember where she came from. The table she sat at wasn't bought with money. It was built with love, sacrifice, and years of quiet giving. And though I paid every bill life ever gave me, the cost of being forgotten still stings the most. But that night, under the flicker of candlelight, I realized I didn't need her thanks. Just her memory. And that was finally enough.